Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Everyman's Odyssey podcast, where we explore the challenges and values of authentic living through sharing stories and ideas. I'm your host and founder of the podcast, Cole McClure. So, let me just start with a confession. I've been thinking about this episode for a really long time. I've been wanting to do it, but I've really just been scared. I remember as I was writing and recording the episode on how to be a better husband, it just kept highlighting all the areas where I was failing as a husband, or I was weak, or things where, I wasn't doing what I should be. And so I knew that as I was preparing the episode, how to be a better dad, it was going to call up those same weaknesses, and failings and insecurities and things that I should be doing as a father. And I was just afraid to face that. But I finally reached a point where I felt like it's just time to face those insecurities and those fears and have this conversation. Not only, for everybody here who wants to learn how to be a better dad, but certainly for myself in that pursuit. So I have 3 daughters, ages 15, 8, and 4. 3 very unique young ladies in 3 very unique stages of their lives. So there is never a dull moment, never a time where I don't have an opportunity to learn something, to teach something, or my fear really to screw something up. Every day, my heart aches to be a better father to these little girls. And some days are great, and we make great memories, and I teach them valuable lessons, and we really connect. And then other times, at the end of the night, when I'm sending them to bed or tucking them in, I just stand there and see their peaceful faces and think about all the ways that I wish I had done things differently that day. The patience I could have had, or the time we could have spent together. I just think about the dad that I wanted to be at the start of the day and then realize where I ended up. So for me, this episode represents an opportunity to dig deep into those reasons and make that effort to make myself better for them. And I hope it presents the same opportunity to you. So we're going to break this episode into 3 basic categories that are easy to understand, evaluate, and implement in our own lives. And so these categories are an honest assessment of where we are as dads right now, as an individual, the target of the dad that you are meant and aspire to be, and some practical advice and steps on how to move from the dad that you are to that ideal version of yourself that you want to be for your kids. And there's plenty of history, experiences, and wisdom that can lead us on the path to that. And I can promise that if you listen to this whole episode and you apply all the things that we discuss here, you will not fail to continue to mess it up and make mistakes anyways. This isn't how to be a perfect father, but you will learn that you can absolutely do better, and you'll be able to identify how to do that. And importantly, you'll discover that you're not alone. As every dad listening to this starts to identify some of the areas in their life where they wish they were doing better as a dad, and we communicate with each other, you'll see that you're not the only one who has that same struggle. So, step 1, the assessment. Now, obviously, I'm not with you guys right now. So if you're listening to this or watching this, all I can do is give you my assessment of where I am as a dad to show you what I mean And to make this easy and keep myself and keep you guys from kind of spiraling down this, pit of despair, identifying, maybe that you're not where you want to be, we're just going to keep it simple. So we're going to identify 3 strengths and 3 weaknesses that we have. 3 things that you're doing well, and 3 things that you know you can, could, and should do better. So I guess I'll start. For strengths, I think one that I would like to list is communication. Now, this is in no way a claim to perfection, but I am confident that all 3 of my daughters are positive of how much that I love them. I make sure to tell them every chance I get. I make eye contact and identify specific things about them that I appreciate. And when I communicate with them, I try to speak to them in a way that resonates with them individually. And I try to adapt my approach to the situation based on which of my daughters I'm dealing with so that I can best reach them. This next one, I wrestled with a little bit because I wasn't really sure if I could count it as a strength or if this is indeed a weakness of mine. But for my second strength, after doing this assessment, I put time investment. I honestly always doubt myself, and I beat myself up, and I tell myself that I could do more and I could do better. But if I take away the negative self-talk and the pessimism and just bring honesty and thoughtfulness, I actually do make more of an effort than I give myself credit for. There's always something else that I could do or some other sacrifice that I could have made. And I do think about that a lot. But for the most part, I think I'm engaged on most days. I don't just shut off when I get home from work. I take time to hear about my kids' days. And I try to make time to at least do something small with each of them. And like I said, at first consideration, I would have put this area as a weakness because I just so strongly want to do better and want to do more. But looking at my heart and the limited time that I do have and how I invest in my kids, I think it's a strong point. And the last thing I'll say as a strength that I have as a dad to 3 girls is the husband that I am to their mother. Now, this may be a controversial statement, but I don't believe that you can be a crappy husband and be a good dad at the same time. Whether you're raising sons or daughters, you are setting the example. You're setting the bar every day for your sons. You're showing the type of love that is acceptable to give and to receive, and you're showing how a wife should be treated and how a husband should act. And for your daughters, you're showing them the best example of what they can expect from their future husband. And so I certainly hope that the effort and the dedication and love and service that I give to my wife shows them where a husband's priorities should be. And I hope that it's a good example for how they will demand that they're treated someday. I love my wife intensely and to the best of my ability, and I do believe that is to the benefit of my daughters. So with the fun part out of the way now, I'll identify 3 weaknesses or failings that I have as a dad. And Remember, the point of this is not to compare ourselves to each other, but to find strength in our similar struggles and encouragement and wisdom from knowing that wherever you are in this journey to being the dad you're called to be, we can all benefit from being honest with ourselves and with the other dads in our lives. So, my first weakness, and I think this is probably going to be a pretty common one, let me know, patience. Um, Perhaps it's a little easier with one kid, but it doesn't matter how many kids you have. Dealing with these little young people that you love so dearly can be a challenge and a test of your patience. And this one comes and goes, but it's rarely something that I feel like I'm really excelling at. Um, I'll let circumstances or feelings or other things that have nothing to do with my kids and certainly aren't their fault get in the way of showing them grace and patience. Too often I get frustrated or irritated with the fact that my kids are acting childish, and I forget that's what children do. I think sometimes I selfishly want them to be more mature and have less questions and less needs because I'm tired or I've had a long day or I just want to relax or insert whatever thing that I want to make about me instead. It's certainly not fair, and I can see it in their eyes when I do it and what it does to them. So, the second weakness I have, and when I was writing this, I took some time to pray for clarity. And like I've talked about before, I struggle with hearing that voice and getting that response in an answer from God. So it was humbling and maybe even a little insulting how quickly I received an answer when I'm asking, like, okay, what other weaknesses do I have? And immediately I heard an answer: discipline. And it's not the discipline you're thinking of. It's not a weakness of disciplining my children. My weakness that affects who I am as a dad is self discipline. A weakness I have as a father is exhibiting the value of self discipline in my own life as an example to my children. I think there's not enough times where I'm doing something hard and doing it with a good attitude. Whether it's something that's hard but for my benefit, like eating healthy and exercising more, or making my bed, or just taking care of things around the house and small home improvement things that I should be taking care of. I think too often my kids see me avoiding hard things or doing them begrudgingly instead of doing them with a good attitude. And I'm embarrassed to say that for years, my kids watched me play video games instead of playing with them, or instead of fixing broken things around the house. And I'm not trying to say that video games are bad and video games are the problem and that's what you need to do to be a good dad, is throw out whatever gaming system you have. That's not what I'm saying. The problem, like I said, was my discipline and my time management to take care of first things first, and to prioritize my time. And so not putting out that effort has set an example for my children that's hard to think about and very convicting to realize the standard I've set for that important value in your life is having the self-discipline to do the hard things, do them well, and do them with a good attitude. I remember I hadn't been out of the army very long. We just had one daughter, and she was very young, like maybe a year old, maybe not even that old at that point. Oh no, she was just over a year because she was walking, and it was late springtime. And so Nicole, she's off working, So I'm supposed to be taking care of Addison. And so Addison gets up early in the morning. We go out to the living room and we play for a minute. But I was tired and I thought, you know what, she'll be fine. I'm a new dad. Like, I'm gonna just lay down on the couch and just sleep for a few minutes. And I fell asleep, and I don't know how she did it, but she had this little green stool with flowers painted on it, had 3 legs, and she loved to sit on this stool. Um, Somehow, while I was sleeping, she broke one of the legs off of that stool and woke me up by smashing it down on my face. And my goodness, what a terrible way to wake up, and a literal violent wake up call to be more present in my kid's life. And that was a very lasting lesson in discipline, um, that she was gracious enough to provide. And we still talk about that to this day. And it's a good memory now, but it made me realize in the moment, like, I'm a mess. Like, I need to do better at being there for my kid. This last one isn't a direct contradictory to the strength that I had as time investment, but I was watching a YouTube video recently about something that's very important for dads, and it's the pursuit of your children. And and as he was talking about what that means, I realized that while I do invest time and I make sacrifices for my kids, I don't pursue them the way that I wish I was. And what I mean by that is a unique and intentional relationship with each of my daughters. Making memories and putting out the effort, regardless of whether it's accepted or reciprocated, doing my part to put that effort out into each of them, to spend time with them on their own. And I'll be honest, that was a lot easier when we just had one kid. Um, we would go on daddy-daughter dates or play dolls or have pretend concerts in the woods where we're just dancing on rocks and singing. But now with 3 children, it's a real struggle to find sufficient and equal time for all 3 of them to do those things. And I think that sometimes that leads me to just step back from those opportunities altogether. Because if no one's getting that time, then at least it's fair. But in reality, it's just equally unfair to all of them. And that is a heartbreaking realization that I could be doing so much more. Don't get me wrong, there's still father-daughter dates and little trips to the store and after-school day breakdowns and bedtime stories and things like that. But it's absolutely a weakness of mine as a father. And so hopefully that all helps paint a picture of what I'm talking about when we're doing an honest assessment of who we've been and who we are as dads to our kids. Take this opportunity to evaluate your performance, both good and bad. And like I said, it's not about comparison. I just wanted to set the example to show how we can identify where we are and make a plan for moving forward. And now that we have an idea of where we stand, let's dig into what it is that we're supposed to be striving for, the dad that we're supposed to be. And it'll be no surprise that we're going to lean pretty heavily on biblical scripture for this. And again, regardless of where you stand spiritually and what your beliefs are, the concept of having a heavenly father and that loving heavenly father calling you to be loving and having standards and expectations for who you are as a dad to your children, that's a pretty good place to pull from when we want to strive for something great. So let's dig into that. So, to keep this from getting too abstract and getting into the weeds, because it is a daunting topic, what type of dad are you supposed to be? What's the standard? So, to keep us structured in here, we're going to place this within the confines of the four pillars of Stoic principles. And that's something that we've talked about previously on the podcast. And I think that's a good set of boundaries to understand where we should be. And so those four pillars are wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance, also known as self control. And so to start here with wisdom, let's see what the Bible has to offer when talking about wisdom. And there's a verse here, James 3:17. It says, "But the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruits, impartial and sincere." And that's kind of a lot packed into one short verse there. But when we're talking about wisdom, there is, of course, no higher form of wisdom than God's wisdom and something that comes from heaven. So, first things first is purity. And right there, that's a high standard and a big topic that we could get into. But your intentions and your heart when you are pursuing something, the fruits of that wisdom should show a life of purity and loving peace and being gentle and open to reason, meaning open-minded, not completely closed and set in your own ways, but willing to hear somebody out, and being merciful. Those are all exceptional qualities when it comes to being a dad. Those are things that you want your kids to be able to expect from you. Mercy and reason and being open to what they have to say and loving peace with your children. That is something to strive for. The Bible also says something about what we as men should look like as we get older. And of course, getting older comes with a lot of times, fatherhood and raising children. And in Titus 2:2, it says, "Older men are to be sober-minded, dignified, self-controlled, sound in faith, in love, and in steadfastness." And so, to me, that doesn't explicitly hit on the key word wisdom, but it shows you a picture of what a wise man looks like. Somebody who's older and in a position of influence and leadership should be sober-minded, dignified, controlled, sound, and have love and steadfastness. Someone who is reliable and walks in love in everything that he does. Now, stepping outside of Scripture, since we are working within the bounds of Stoicism here, Epictetus, who is a Stoic philosopher that we've talked about before, he says, "Be careful to leave your sons well instructed rather than rich, for the hopes of the instructed are better than the wealth of the ignorant." And I think that's a pretty wise thing to say in understanding the care that you give to your children, and provision is a huge part of your responsibility as a dad. But your number one goal is to not make your kids rich. Your goal as a father is to make them wise and well instructed, and so that they know the rules for a good person and a good life, because their hope outweighs the wealth of the fool. And so take the time to instruct your children well. And now the last verse I'm going to touch on here for wisdom comes from 1 Chronicles 28:10. And this is David, King David, talking to his son Solomon. And he says, "Be careful now, for the Lord has chosen you to build a house for the sanctuary. Be strong and do it." And so in this scenario, Solomon has been chosen to build a house for the Lord. David is, of course, passed over for that responsibility for some other reasons that we're not going to get into. But at this point, David has lived a long life and has learned a lot of lessons, and mostly learned them the hard way. And so within this verse, the context is all of David's mistakes, all of his past comes out in this fervent plea to his son: be careful, be strong, and do the work. And those three things right there are full of the wisdom of all of David's past mistakes and successes. So be wise in your application, and don't waste time trying to cover up or forget your mistakes. Use those as tools and as evidence to show your kids the right way to do something. And so the second pillar of Stoic principles here is courage. And so the first verse I'm going to use here follows up right after what we were just talking about in 1 Chronicles 28:10. This is 1 Chronicles 28:20, and just the first part of the verse here says, David said to Solomon his son, be strong and courageous and do it. Do not be afraid and do not be dismayed, for the Lord God, even my God, is with you. And being courageous as a dad is very important. And making sure that that courage is instilled in your children is even more important. And being able to use your own life experience like David did here to really emphasize the power and the potential that your children have to do something hard and something where the stakes are high. We don't want to teach our kids to shy away from hard things. We want to let them know that they are strong and that they are brave and that they are capable. And so imagine this task that Solomon has of building, one of the greatest temples the world has ever known, and following in his father's footsteps, King David. That could be intimidating. But he just says to his son, be strong and courageous and do the work. Do not be afraid. And we as dads have so much power in the words that we say to our children. So I know I hate hearing my kids say, I can't. And it gets me every time. And as soon as that comes out of their mouths, I want to correct that. And I don't want them to believe that they can't. So that means that we have to be courageous to follow the things that we feel called to do, the things that we're scared to do. If you want to get back into shape, but you're scared of the gym, or you want to start a podcast, but you're scared of sounding like an idiot, do the things that you're afraid of. Express yourself, be creative, be bold, and show your children the beautiful blessing that is, and give them the encouragement and the power to do so in their own lives. And this next verse here is from 1 Corinthians 15:58. It says, therefore, my beloved brothers, be steadfast, immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, knowing that in the Lord your labor is not in vain. And again, that's something you got to dig into and think about a little bit to really connect that with the word courage. But this first part here is what really stands out to me. Be steadfast and immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord. And that makes me think about, when you know what's right, do not compromise. When something is hard or scary, but you know in your heart that you're doing the right thing, not that just you want to be right, but that what you're doing is right, do not back down, and show your children through a life of living unafraid and absolutely unwilling to move away from what is right. And the third pillar here for our Stoic principles is justice. And the first verse I'm going to read here is Micah 6:8, and that's actually something that we've talked about before. If you remember the episode where my friend Ben came on the show and he talked about one of his favorite verses, is Micah 6:8, and he says, he has told you, O man, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you but to do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God. And so, in that episode with Ben, he talked about, what does that mean to do justice? And what that means to me is it's not being a judge to your children necessarily. But again, this is about more than just your decisions in the specific role of parenting. This is about who you are as a man and how that is expressed in your character as a father. And so to do justice is a daily pursuit to make things right. So to seek justice is to make something right. And a lot of times that's going to come with admitting that you're wrong. And that is going to happen as a dad. You are going to do something wrong in the moment that you absolutely need to be accountable for. And that is going to mean apologizing to your kids. There will be times, whether it's a big deal or a small deal, and even more so in the small deals, to let them know that justice matters and it is applied universally. So when you screw up, you approach your children, you explain yourself, and you apologize. And when you foster that environment of honesty and humility, then when you dole out justice in the form of discipline or punishment for your own children, it's backed up by the context of your own ownership. And it makes sense. And it's something that provides clarity to their world, knowing that justice is a real universal thing that isn't just some abstract rule or punishment coming down from parent to child, but that it is how the world remains in good order and that it applies to you as well. And so this can honestly be a tiring thing to constantly make sure that you are making things right. And, best case scenario as God designed it. And this isn't the case for everybody, I know, but hopefully you have a partner in your life who is there to help you, not just to point out when you're wrong, like, hey, you better go apologize, but again, to be an example of two people who are living together in a way where they are willing and working to make things right and to keep things right. And this last thing is temperance, or you can call it, self-control or discipline. And like I said, that's already something that I struggle with. I think I show restraint in a lot of things, but when we're talking about, discipline, we've already established that's one of my weaknesses here. But the scripture that we're going to use to support this idea of temperance is Galatians 5:22 and 23. And it says, but the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such thing, there is no law. So what we're talking about here is sometimes it's hard to know what the right thing to do is. But if you think about these things, you're headed in the right direction. Against these things, there is no law. You're not wrong if you're pursuing these things. If you are pursuing self-control, and when you're in a scenario where you want to lose your patience, or you want to have an outburst, or maybe you want to be a little spiteful, honestly, your kid irritated you or they did something dumb, and now you have an opportunity to react in a way that teaches them a lesson. But it's coming from a place of selfishness that would get you an immediate gratification. But if you stopped and showed some restraint, some temperance, you would understand that that's not the way that you want to move forward with the situation. So taking that time, and we've talked about this idea before, slowing down your decision-making process when you're able to. That way you give yourself the opportunity to show restraint. And there's countless of, biblical scriptures or famous quotes, or I'm sure examples in your own life where you wish that you would have held your tongue just a couple seconds longer and give yourself some time to show some restraint and make the right call. So, and that goes back to what the Bible says about being an older man and being dignified and showing self-restraint, not having these outbursts of emotion, which maybe you're prone to, maybe you're not, maybe you're very level, but showing restraint with your kids is very important because it's absolutely something you want your children to be exhibiting. You don't want outbursts in the store. You don't want tantrums or stupid fights. You want your kids to stop and think about their decisions, and you want them to think about the consequences of their actions. And kids learn by observing their parents. And so if you want your kid to be more patient, you want your kid to show more self-restraint and self-control, you have to be exhibiting those characteristics if you want them to adopt them at any point. And so that's something that's really important as a dad. And so I've got one more verse here for temperance, and it's Colossians 3:21. And it says, "Fathers, do not provoke your children, lest they become discouraged." And to me, this speaks to self-control, because I know, especially with my oldest, I'm very hard on her. Because I know what she's capable of. I have high expectations and high standards, and I want to push her to the greatest version of herself that I know that she is. But sometimes I can be a little much. Even when my heart is in the right place, sometimes I just push too much. And so this verse is a good reminder to chill out, even if it's because you're trying to push them towards greatness. Sometimes they don't need a push. Sometimes that push is just going to push them away. Sometimes they need to be drawn in and held close and encouraged, not discouraged. And so that's something that I definitely need to hang on to, is this verse reminding me to just chill out once in a while and just be there and not have to constantly be pushing. And I hope that that's something moving forward, after doing this episode, that I implement into my life, because like I said, I know that I have incredible children and they have incredible futures ahead of them, and I don't want them to miss any opportunities. And I feel that pressure. Like, I don't want them to miss out on what their life has for them. I don't want them to feel insecure or not good enough or not brave enough, not smart enough. I want them to know what they are capable of. But sometimes you just got to relax a little bit and show some self-restraint. And so that covers what it looks like to be a good dad and what we're shooting for. And again, those are some great verses to go back and read and put that under the confines and within this structure, just to help ourselves of wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. And that brings us to the final portion, and that's some practical steps, some actionable advice on how we move forward from here. We've established who we are as dads currently, what we're good at, what we're bad at, and how we can improve in those areas. And now we know what the standard is. We know what we should be looking like and acting like, and the characteristics that we should be modeling for our children. How do we act that out? And so I've got some points here that I want to talk about. And again, I want to keep this simple because I want it to be something that we can remember every day and repeat to ourselves. And so just some things that really, when I think about, convict me, but also encourage me, because they're simple concepts that we actually can act out in every choice that we make throughout our day. And so I'm going to run through the list here, and then we'll go over one by one. So I've got be honest, be humble, say sorry, make memories, love your wife, improve yourself, and build community. And so let's go back. The first one here, be honest. It's pretty self-explanatory, but I still think it's something that we need to remind ourselves of. And a lot of these are going to be intertwined and linked to each other. And obviously there are some parenting secrets or bedtime stories, fairy tales, whatever it is. I'm not saying crush all sense of mystery, but I am saying to be honest with your kids in a way that still, protects them from certain things. They don't need to know about all of your struggles and stresses as an adult. Their world can still be magical, and that's okay. But, and this really applies even more as your children get older. It's something I've noticed a lot, with my 15-year-old. Being honest means that when there's a conflict, don't be passive aggressive. Don't just dole out the punishment and there's no conflict. Like, all right, well, this is what you have to do now. Bye. Be honest and have the conversation. Explain why you said the things that you said. If they say something to you that really sets you off, be honest and explain why it wasn't okay what they said to you and why you had the response that you did. You need to be able to talk and work these things out with open communication that you want them to have with you want them to have with their friends, you want them to have with their, future partners. It is important because we're setting the tone. We are setting the standards for communication, and that needs to be rooted in honesty for any sort of personal growth in any relationship that they have. So establish that as early as possible. The other thing is be humble. That also comes down to just not taking yourself so seriously. And again, this is something I struggle with. Sometimes I'll be joking around with my teenager and we're both having good fun, and then she'll say something and it just like hits a nerve and I'm done. I am no longer funny. I am irritated. And it's really just not fair to flip that switch and all right, game's over. I'm done with you. But I struggle with that because I absolutely will require, respect and proper communication. That isn't necessary. That's not negotiable as a father. But then when we're having fun, just poking fun at each other, sometimes I lose track of that and my pride gets in the way. And so that's something that I need to work on personally, is that balance to not take myself so seriously. And of course, the humility leads into this idea of being open-minded and open to reasoning. Not everything has to be my way or the highway, especially as your children mature at whatever age that they become better at communicating and they start to tell you their needs, their wants, and their reasonings behind things. You have to grow into this humility of being willing to hear that. And when your kids are very young, those first few years, that doesn't really play into a whole lot of things because you're making all the decisions because they could not survive without you. But as your kids get older and smarter and they want to tell you what they want and they want to tell you why and they want to understand the world around them. And so that leads to more questions than you will ever want to answer. But humbling yourself enough to take the time to answer those questions, it's good for you and it's certainly good for them, and it gives them understanding about the world around them. It makes them feel like they have a place in your home and they have a mind and a train of thought and a heart that is respected. So don't take yourself too seriously and be willing to hear what they have to say. And again, we've already talked about this one. Say sorry. I'm starting to do that more and more with my teenager because, like I said, I'm really hard on her sometimes, and sometimes I lose my patience. And that's not just with her, that's with the younger ones as well, where if I lose my patience and I react in a way that I shouldn't have, even if they were being out of control, they're responsible for their actions. I'm responsible for my actions. So if they weren't listening and they were acting out, and then I lose my patience and I react in a way that I shouldn't have, they're still going to have reasonable and just consequences for their behavior. But I'm still not okay with me losing my patience. I'm not okay with them thinking that that's okay. So I have to go in and I have to apologize and I have to explain to them, this is what you were doing. This is why that's not okay. And that is why I reacted this way. But my reaction isn't okay either. And I'm sorry. Um, and there's been times where I've, asked my 8-year-old for forgiveness. And she'll say to me, "It's okay, Daddy." And I look at her and tell her, like, "No, it's not okay, but I appreciate that you forgive me because it's not okay to just brush things under the rug. It's not okay to just dismiss your own mistakes. You got to own up to it and you have to set the example. Everything that you want out of your kids that is good and building character in them has to be something that you can exhibit back to them." And the next thing is an easy one. Make memories. That's the fun part. Like, that is fantastic. The hard part is making time to do it. But man, when you figure it out, you get the timing down, you make the sacrifice to make the plans, making those memories with your kids, they outlive you, that's for sure. Those memories, man, they're so important to me. And I know they're important to my kids. Go on trips. If you can't go on big vacations, go on little day trips, go on drives, go on walks, build forts in the house. I've done some pretty ridiculous things that are, embarrassing. I've got 3 daughters, so we've set up pet shops and I've played different customers to where I'll be a crazy guy and then I'll put on one of their princess dresses and I'll be, the princess coming into the shop that they're looking for, and it's silly and it's embarrassing, but they remember and it's totally worth it. So whatever is in your schedule and your budget, whatever you can make work, it doesn't have to be huge. They're not expecting, trips to Disney World every month. They just want to know that their dad was there and was on their level to do things that they cared about. And so find little things, which means finding out what they care about. Know what your kids love and figure out a way to give it to them. And most of the time it's pretty simple. Even though there's so many days where your kids can seem impossible to please, at their core, what they want from their dad is love and time. And we can do that. This next thing, again, doesn't necessarily apply to everybody. If this isn't you, if it's not you now, maybe it will be in the future. So hang on to this. Love your wife and do that well and do it selflessly and powerfully, because you want your sons to be excellent husbands and you want your daughters to have incredibly high standards. But they're growing up in a home where you are the standard. What they see from you is what they will expect from their husband. So don't take that lightly. Go above and beyond for your wife. Be a good partner, be a cheerleader and a best friend, and do life together, which means that you will also want to be making memories with her apart from your children. Invest in that relationship, and I can't stress that enough. Invest in that, and that is to the benefit of your children. And the next thing is improve yourself. Hopefully, through this process here, we're identifying some areas where we can already take steps to do that. And that's part of what this whole podcast is about, is improving ourselves and figuring out ways that we can do that. But going back to, being courageous, find something that you're afraid of or something that you're bad at and get better, you know? Do something to show your children that who you are is good and worthy of love, but who you can be is still attainable. And find something that is a weakness in your own life and work on it. And maybe it's not something that they're going to see you doing. Maybe it's not physical. Maybe you're not, going to be going to the gym and your kids are going to see you lose weight. Maybe it is, but maybe it's something where you're timid. You're afraid of what people think. And so that holds you back at work. It holds you back in relationships, and it just kind of suppresses you. Work on that. And there's no way that your kids won't see that in your life, and it's going to affect them, and it's going to let them know what they're capable of. So every time you improve something about yourself, it makes you a better dad, because it makes you more confident and makes you better suited to raise your children up in strength as well. And the very last thing here is build community. Build it with your family, whether it be through friends or church, whatever it is. Build a network of people in your life that you can count on. But more specifically, for you as a dad, find community. Find other dads who know that you're struggling, that they're struggling, and it's okay. It's part of the process. Struggling means that you're working on it, hopefully. So find other dads around you and find somebody that you can confide in. Hopefully a group, but even if it's just one other guy that that maybe they have a kid the same age, or maybe they have a kid who's a little bit older and you've got some questions and you want some advice, or, as we go through these things, we start to work on things and you see somebody with, a new kid or they're having their own issues, just reach out and be there for each other. And building that community will make us all better dads, because we can lean on each other. We can ask for advice. We can vent a little bit in a safe environment, and just don't do this alone, because being a dad is an absolutely huge deal and a huge blessing. And we need a lot of help, and we need each other. There's nothing in the world I would rather be than a great dad. And I'm very fortunate to have a great wife who is a great mother, and I have great children. So it should be easy for me to be a great dad. And it's still really hard. It's super important to me, and it's still really hard. So don't do it alone. And thank you so much for listening to this. And man, I hope that it helps. I hope that there's something here that sticks out to you. If nothing else, do that assessment. Figure out where you're at, and that what you need to work on, and then be honest with yourself and be honest with the people in your life. And so other people know, now everybody watching this knows my exact weaknesses as a dad. And so if you're in my life like that, feel free to point it out. Like I said, I've been very nervous to do this episode, because it brings up those weaknesses in myself. And it took a lot of preparation and a lot of work to really figure out what I wanted to say here, because it is really important and I don't take it lightly. And so I hope that this helps you guys. And please feel free to reach out and let me know what you think, what's something that you want to work on. What ideas do you have for building community in your own life? Certainly, I hope that the Everyman's Odyssey podcast can be a hub for that, if that's what you're looking for. But as always, Thank you so much for tuning in, guys. I appreciate it. Take care.